I applied to a lot of places. I only got like one or two interviews out of hundreds of applications. I felt like I'm pretty good in an interview, but I can't even get to that step. It took me about 2 weeks when I accepted an offer with Twilio.
Thanks for joining me, DJ. Really excited for you starting at Twilio soon here. Kind of could you walk me through a little bit about like you and your background before deciding to jump into tech sales?
Sure. Yeah. So I have, I guess, about 6 years experience in IT. A variety of analyst roles: IT analyst, business analyst, and data analyst. Like I mentioned, I've been in those roles for about 6 years, and probably experienced things that people in IT roles experience. You get to those yearly reviews, and you're doing everything correctly, and you only get that 3% bump in kind of salary and stuff. So, just really took a lot of time to, focus on what my skill set was and what my goals were, and ultimately just determined that, I'll be best suited in sales. So, you know, you guys at TSM, specifically my mentor Ben, were really able to help me take the experience that I had in IT and really kind of, pick some things out that really, felt like it would make me a strong, candidate to transition into sales. So, essentially just tell my story in the best way possible so that people could really get a sense of, my character and, my motivations and my skill set that I currently have and how it would be
Yep.
good to transition into a sales career.
Yep, that's awesome. And as you went about deciding like, hey, IT isn't right for me, tell me more about the thought process of coming across sales as, the career path you want to go down and maybe tech sales specifically.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say, sales in the past, I guess, my exposure to it was mostly 100% commission roles, like life insurance and, door-to-door sales, things like that. But I never really, I guess, realized that I could use the skills that I learned in the tech industry and translate that into, a career in sales. Some of the things that were really important to me, considering my transition was, what I mentioned earlier, the fact that I would be in full control of my compensation. So it wasn't, I'm doing everything correctly, but I'm still getting to the end of the year and only getting, that small range in or raise in salary. It was, the harder I work, the more input I put in, the higher my output's going to be. And that was something that really excited me as well. And then again, just being able to use, my knowledge of tech and IT and, kind of my love for learning different systems and understanding that system to, better help my clients. It would be very similar, within the sales aspect, but I would be able to have more control over my salary. Also, I was an athlete in college and really my entire life I was a wrestler. So very much became accustomed to that kind of grind mentality and, goal setting and kind of doing the right things inside wrestling practice and outside of wrestling practice as well. So just the more that I learned about the BDR SDR role, I noticed a lot of similarities between that. And ultimately the ability to set goals is, huge in sales as I'm sure that
Yeah.
and I really felt that, it would kind of revitalize me, in my career making the transition. So, couldn't be
Yeah.
happier.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Tech sales still feels like this hidden secret within the tech
Yeah.
industry where everyone thinks like, oh, the engineers are making a lot of money, which they absolutely are. But often, like, at some of these more like B2B SaaS companies, sales rep, an enterprise sales rep ends up being the one who like takes home the most.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like these crazy outlier earnings years you can have if you like truly be a top performer and you're willing to do the things to get there. And so when it came to, okay, cool, you decided you want to go into tech sales, was there any sort of like applying, interviewing you did before, stumbling across us?
Yeah, so I would say I applied quite a bit. As far as interviewing, I really struggled, probably just going back to some of the things that I mentioned that you guys were able to do for me as far as, curating my resume to really make my past experience apply to a sales role. I applied to a lot of places. I think I maybe only got like one or two interviews out of, probably hundreds of applications. And so I know coming into this program, that was, one of the things that I mentioned, like, hey, I'm applying and I felt like I'm pretty good in an interview, but I can't even get to that step.
Yeah.
So at that point, definitely was like, I need some help here. I would at least to get in front of a company and kind of learn on my feet and figure out what kind of questions they're trying to ask me and stuff. But I couldn't even get to that point. both before, kind of coming to you guys. So I was, kind of at a standstill. I really wanted to make this transition, but just kind of didn't know how.
Yeah, 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 totally. And so then like once you join the program, tell me more about like kind of the problems you were facing in the job search, like how those were addressed if we hit the ball there for you.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I kind of just was doing applying, but there really was no rhyme or reason to it. Something that I think was huge in landing me the role in Twilio, and just something that I think that you guys do really well is if I kind of send a cold outreach to the hiring manager or the recruiter, that shows that not only I'm interested, but also that I understand the role that I'm going to be doing, because that is essentially what a BDR and SDR is. So I thought that that was, really awesome. And I think ultimately that was, probably one of the key factors there. And then, also just all of the work that we did with my resume, it was a lot of, kind of I would get done work and then, hop on the computer with my mentor kind of right away to kind of go over my resume and really fine tune a lot of the skills that would transition and, help tell my story a bit better.
Yeah, totally. And tell me more about that. Maybe like you had a full-time job while you were on this job search. Like often people say, trying to get a job is a job in and of itself. Like how was that balancing the two?
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging at the times. Like I mentioned, it was a lot of, hopping off meetings for my full-time job and then hopping on meetings with my mentor and stuff. But, once I really saw what you guys were doing and, how impactful it could be, and once I made that determination, I really wanted to do sales, it was like, you just have to kind of find the time. So I mean, it was definitely challenging, but I wouldn't say it was too much. I mean, the expectations as far as what you have to do in the program, it's not anything super insane as far as your time. Like you can easily have a family like I have and a full-time job and still get all of the things that you're supposed to get done, and even more so. I mean, I was doing stuff to work on my communication and really fine tune a lot of the things that I was going to be saying in interviews, even outside of what was recommended by you guys to me. So I think that that was a big help too. But it's if you want to join this program and you're serious about finding a career in sales, then you have to act seriously as well, and really take this stuff seriously, because this is the career for possibly the rest of your life. So really have to bring that seriousness to it.
Yeah, and like we want it to be both sides to be serious because we want this to happen fast for you, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the whole point is just like we want to start you on your career path that you're
Yeah.
excited about. And endless job search can almost like demoralize you about the career path you're on, right? And so do you know roughly like how long it took you to land a job and any sort of time range?
Yeah, so I was trying to look. I think maybe my mentor said it took me about 20 days from
Yeah.
from joining the program to actually landing with Twilio. I was trying to look back to when my outreach specifically started and then when I accepted an offer, and I think it was like 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
Just between that time. So, you guys encourage us to move fast, and things definitely move fast. But, it's exciting, and it was honestly a lot of fun for me. But I definitely didn't expect it to only last 2 weeks, given I'd been applying for, months and months.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, like, let's say, there is someone who has, like, when you came across TSM, was it just like immediately you joined the program, or tell me more about like how you discovered us?
Yeah. So I think I discovered Chris on TikTok, just talking about tech sales, which, I already had knowledge of it and had been applying to these companies, but just was really, I guess, curious as to what you guys could do to help me break in. Obviously, a little skeptical at first, but, once I really spoke with Chris and saw some of the results that other people were getting in the program and learned more about it, and kind of the things that you do, it started to make a lot of sense to me. So, after that first conversation with Chris, I really wasn't hesitant at all. And then, once I signed up and saw all the resources that you guys had in the program, like I was like, okay, this is actually a really serious thing. It's not just, some one-off coaching session with, someone once a week. Like it's actually serious work and fine-tuning every aspect of the interview process.
Yeah, awesome. I love to hear that. And so,
Yeah.
let's say, like, someone is considering they saw Chris on TikTok or his wife Olivia. Like, what would you say to someone who is considering the program and is unsure?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I'm sure there's a lot of people that were in my shoes as far as, just applying to all of these roles, and you see on the roles when you're applying, 200 other people applied, 100 other people applied. So you really have to do whatever it takes to stand out. And I believe for me that was joining TSM. Like I mentioned, it did take a bit of effort and a lot of time to really get myself ready for the interview process. But all of the things that TSM is doing, on kind of the backside and helping me, get interviews for these roles, I just wouldn't have been able to do it, on my own with my schedule and stuff. So it was a really good mix of, really excelling my skills and my communication and helping me, land these interviews and excel in these interviews. But, it was also so much on the back end going on to get me in front of these people. So I'd really say like if you're serious about sales and, you've been applying for roles and you really want to make the switch and jump into tech sales, you kind of need a big change in your life. Obviously what you're doing isn't working. So there's no kind of harm in trying something new. And I'm really glad that I did, obviously. So
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for your time, DJ. I'll be sure to like leave, your LinkedIn below if people want to connect with you. And then yeah, if anyone wants to join TSM, I'll also leave, our website where you can check all that stuff out. But yeah,
yeah,
thanks for your time, DJ.
yeah, thank you.